Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Arley. So this is the tech dev frontier. So the idea here is to share knowledge across the world. And I am a software engineering. So basically I'm a software engineering. So basically I've been working for a long time in especially Java, Backend, Flutter, front end, and a lot of technologies that are in the daily basis of every software engineering in the world. So in the last live stream that I did, we talked about your creating the first Spring Boot application. So basically we created a table, we checked, for example, the database tables, and then we set up the project, mapping an entity called products, and we mapped the entity, create the repositories, the services, and the controllers. So basically went through all the steps to creating a Spring Boot REST API. So we also talked about the response entity object. So you could, you have entire control of the HTTP codes that you can return in your API REST. Okay, so today we're going to the next step of our API REST, which is integrating Spring Security. So what is actually Spring Security? So when we are creating our REST API, we don't want to give access to everybody to our REST API. So in enterprise software and systems analysis, everything that involves an enterprise company that needs to protect the data, we need to introduce the authorization and authentication to our project. So what is the difference between authentication and authorization? Basically, the authentication, it's a way to say that you are you. For example, the user logged in into the API is, for example, I don't know, maybe it's called Daniel. So Daniel logged in into your system, so you keep the entire track of what Daniel is doing, and by that, when Daniel logs in into your REST API, you give him a JWT token, which is a access token that allows him to make requests to your API REST, and you know that this is a JWT token. It's a token valid for this specific user. The authorization, on the other hand, is the what Daniel can do inside my REST API. For example, he can create products, but he can't, for example, sell something to a customer. So you can add some restrictions inside that JWT token, and only people that get in the row, specific row, can access the specific part in your system. So the idea here is to create a project that allows that. So for example, Daniel is a manager. So basically he will have a row called admin row or row admin, for example. It's the default here. So he'll be able to basically access the entire API REST. The entire system will be available for him. But if other user that has a low access level to the system, he might not be able to access the entire system. For example, creating products, or maybe he can't access a few reports about sales or something like that. So the idea here is to implement this Spring Security, and you'll be able to do this implementation in an enterprise level. What it means? It means that our implementation here you can use in your enterprise systems, because it will be the most common way to protect your system in an API REST. Okay, so let's not wait long and let's go jump to the code. But first, I'm gonna let you know that I'm available. The live chat is available here. So if you have any question, you can ask me. And if you're watching this live stream in the future, you also can ask me questions on the comments below. Okay. So let's get started here. I'm gonna share my screen and let's talk a little bit about our project that we created in the last live stream, and then we're going to continue from there. Okay, so let me show here my screen. Let's share the screen here. Just a second. All right, so now you can see that we have our project here. Let me just organize a little bit here. Let me show you what we did in the last live stream. Okay, so now let me run our project here. Let's run the project and let's check it out here. In the last project, we created our first API REST and we inserted a few products. So our project was called Sales API and we created an entity here. As you can see, we have here the package entity. So we mapped the products entity to map a table in our database with which we use these attributes here, and that was the table. We have a primary key, it's called ID. We also have the product name and the product price using big decimal to store monetization data inside our attribute. Okay, so what we need to do to accomplish our goal today. Let me just check. Let me check our API documentation, and let's see how is okay. Okay, so this is my screen here. Let's open here. Oh, our project is already running. So as you can see, it's running here. If I click here, you see the console. It's right here. I'm not running in debug mode. So it is right here, the code here. So it's running. It detected our database. We're using Postgres, which is the 16. That's the version of the database we were using. Okay, so here in our browser, let's access our documentation. To do that, we just need to access our local address here, our IP address, which is localhost. And here in the port 8080, we're going to access Swagger we. Okay, so oops, what happened here? Let's just me check here the port that I've been using here. Just check our application properties here. It's in the full mode. Let me stop. Oh, I'm just going to delete this. Let's delete the target here and just rerun again, because maybe there's been a while since I ran the project. So let's just click here in the Maven option here. Then let's expand in here. Let's run the Maven install here and see and check if everything's all right. It's working fine here. Let's see, build success. Let's run again. Okay, can hide this panel here. Okay, our project is already running. So let's go to this page. Oh, probably I need to access the index.html. Index.html. Okay, this is our Spring Doc. So this is our API REST documentation. As you can see, we have this called product controller, but we can also change here to be more easy to identify which controller is this. So we just need to go here in our code. Let's find the product controller, and that's these methods, get mapping and post mapping. That's the one that are showing in here. So let's change this name here. So to change the name of the controller, this product controller, because it is using the name with the controller, it's basically this name here, but of course changing the pattern, the parent. So to change that, let's just add here a new annotation here. It's called tags. So tags and products. Let's add products here. This annotation, okay, this annotation comes from this annotation here, which it comes from Swagger. So if we click here, you will see that it comes from IO Swagger v3. So it means that this is coming from Swagger. And there's another detail that I want you to emphasize here, because it usually can be a problem when you're using your Spring Doc to implement your documentation. As you can see in our post mapping, when we are saying something like, oh, this product that it will be coming from our client request, we are going to put inside the product. So this is the data that it's coming from our JSON in our request, and it's going to be produced inside here the product, the object. So here we have this annotation called request body. Request body comes from Spring Framework, and it's saying that our information that it's coming from our request, it's going to be inside our product object here. So when you're importing here, as you can see, we have two request body annotation. That's when you need to be careful, because when you're using request body, you have the request body from IO Swagger. So you have to be careful, because if you use this one here, your project, you not get in syntax error, your project will run perfectly. But when you send a request to this method, you won't be able to check the data inside our products. Okay, so we need to be careful with that and use the Spring Framework annotation here. All right, so let's get started here. We're going to basically implement our Spring Security, and to do that we need a few things. First, we need to add the Spring Security dependencies in our POM XML. This is a crucial part, because when we created the project, we only added the annotations that we needed, because if you add the Spring Security before, you'll be able to set a few settings before, and your project will be the basic authentication will be required in your project. So let's check out our POM XML. In the POM XML file here, we have a few dependencies in here. So let's go through here. Let's zoom in here. We have the JPA, because we're using JPA to access data, so we needed to access the information in our database for mapping entities and everything. We had here the Spring Web, which allows us to create REST controllers and controllers, everything that we need to web applications. And we also had here the PostgreSQL that allows us to connect to our database. This is basically the driver that allows us to connect to the Postgres database. If your project needs to connect to another database like SQL Server or Oracle DB, you need to change this one to the driver that is supported for your database. So basically, this code that we're building here, we're creating in a PostgreSQL. But if you need to change to Oracle DB, for example, the only thing you need to change in your project is the dependency for the database driver, which is the connection for the specific database. And we also had here the Lombok. So it's basically to avoid boilerplate, or use Lombok to be able to create getters, setters, and everything without inserting a lot of repeated code here. And the last one, of course, there's this default one because it's the test for Spring Boot, and we added the dependencies for Spring Doc, which is the Swagger that we can see right here in our project that allows us to create this page here. Let's refresh here. Oh, probably I stopped the project. Let's just run the project again because I changed the annotation inside the controller. So let's go here. Let's update here. Oh, and as you can see, products, it's updated here, and now you can see that it's a little bit more organized. So every time we create a new controller, we just need to add this information, which is here the tag annotation, like this one here. So the entire controller here, it will be in a different session inside our documentation. So every method that are in here, it will be under the products in this case. So we have basically 2 methods in there, so that's why it's only 2 methods in here. Okay, so okay, let's get back here. We're going to our POM.xml again. Let's just close the other tabs here. Let's stop the project for now. We don't need it now. We don't need to be running right now. Let's just close this window here. Okay, so now we need to add a few dependencies here that it will be that is required for us to work with Spring Security. Okay, and we need to add the dependencies for JWT because we are going to parse and generate the JWT tokens, and we need to add and also the Spring Security dependencies. Let me add here, just a second. Okay, so we're going to add the dependencies here. Let's just paste here, and so we have here the Spring Security that we need because we need the start security. So it's the dependency that it allows us to create a security config and everything. We also need to add here the test for Spring Security. So this is used, for example, when I'm going to test to create unit tests, for example, using JUnit, for example, or anything we need to create the tests for when creating tests to our API REST and requires the authentication process. So we use this dependency, and we also have here basically the JSON web token that it will allow us to manipulate and generate tokens, parse tokens, and retrieve data from the token. So we call the coding token, and we have a few other dependencies here because we need the Jackson to serialize and deserialize JSONs in our project. Okay, so I just paste here. Let me save, and we can click here in this button here to for the IntelliJ downloads the dependencies. If you're using a different dependency, you can also run the Maven install in your command line, or just, for example, if you're using an IDE like Eclipse or STS, for example, you just can click inside your project and Maven update. Okay, so now all the dependencies has been downloaded. Okay, so if we run the project here, let's run the project, we'll see a little difference that in the console it will show us a few informations that we are already using security. So this is the information that we are looking for. We want when we activate the Spring Security, which means that we added the dependencies, a few things it will happen inside our project. For example, we already have security blocking our project. So if I go to our Spring Doc here, if and I update here, we are going to be protected, and we have the sign in option here, and this sign in option we can extract the information from here. We have basically a password, and we have a generated password, so we can log in here, and we also have the full username, but we don't need this right now because we're not going to use the basic auth. Basically, we are going to implement the entire Spring Security in our project, so we don't need to log in here right now. Okay, So next step, we are going to create our first classes that we need to implement here. But first, let's talk a little bit about the flow that we are going to implement. There are a few steps that we need to consider when creating a Spring Security implementation. And the first one is tracking who is logged in, or everyone that retrieve a JWT token and a refresh token. So what is a refresh token? For example, in our project, every time someone logs in our API REST, we're going to give them a JWT token, and also we're going to give them a refresh token. So the tokens usually it will expire in like 10 minutes or even less, depending on the critical part of your system. If your system needs to be very restrict when it comes to logged in users. For example, if your application is a bank. So in a bank, for example, every transaction needs to be finished in a few seconds, for example. So probably you need to expire your JWT token in, for example, 40 seconds, 1 minute. It doesn't matter. So basically, you need to say that your JWT token, it will be expired in a few minutes. For example, in our case, we're going to talk about 10 minutes. So every time that someone logs in, the JWT token will be valid for 10 minutes. After that, if we do not give a way to refresh the token, every time the JWT token expires, it will be needed to log it in again. So how we change that? So every time someone logs in our system, we give him a JWT token and a refresh token. Tokens, it will be valid for 10 minutes. After that, when the token is expired, they can ask us for a new JWT token without login. How they do that? They send us a request with their refresh token, and then we try to find the refresh token in our database. If is a refresh token valid, then we retrieve and we generated a new JWT token for them. And the token is valid for 10 minutes. The refresh token can be valid for a week or can be valid for 24 hours. It really depends on the application that you're working for. For example, if your application, if it is a enterprise application, and usually the login can, for example, the refresh token can be valid for like 10 hours. So if they started like 8 a.m., then 10 hours later, it will be needed to log in again. Okay, so for that, we're going to start here, and the first thing we're going to create here is a settings for our expiration token and our refresh token, JWT token expiration, the refresh token expiration, and we need a secret, which we're going to create this. We will sign every JWT token. To do that, let's open here our application properties. So let's click in here, and here in application properties, we're going to paste here a few information that it's very critical for our system. So what we are doing right now, here, let me remove this one here. Okay, so right now we are going to create three variables in our application properties, which will be I'm calling here security JWT secret, which will be our secret. This is a secret for sign our JWT token. So do not use these credentials, these secrets, these passwords, whatever, in your application properties in production. So you never do that. Okay, so you always use like in operating system variables or something like that. So your project will be loading depending on the server and your deployment settings. Okay, so never do that in production. And the other information that we have here is the JWT token, the JWT expiration. So we are saying that in minutes, we are going to expire every 10 minutes. Our JWT token will be expired. So after 10 minutes, our user can access, he can obtain a new JWT token using a refresh token. This refresh token need to be valid for 120 minutes. Of course, that I'm talking about 120 minutes because I'm in a I'm trying to be more practical and make you understand how does it work. But in production, this can take for a day or for hours, weeks. It really depends on the project that you are working on. Okay, so after that, we're going to create our structure that we need. Another topic that is very important for you to consider is the tracking who is logged in, who's is currently in a valid session in your system. So to do that, we are going to create two entities here that later will become, actually we create three, but let's talk about these two tables that we need. It will be the login history. So every time somebody logs in into our API REST, we need to save this informations like the email used, the JWT token used, the user ID, and etc. And the other information that is very critical is to create a table to store the refresh token for these users, because every time he logged in, we give them a refresh token, but this refresh token must be in our database so we can check when they try to refresh their JWT token. Okay, so we are going to work in basically these two tables, and another table, which of course it will be an entity that we are going to create here. It's the user entity. So what is the user? What kind of information we need to create for the user? Basically, in user, we need to create the ID, which will be our primary key, and it will be a identity type. So it will be incremented every time that someone creates a new user. And also we are going to store the email, the password, and for example, the role that he is allowed inside our system. For example, admin, a role user, or maybe he's, I don't know, maybe a manager or something like that. So we need to store in the user database. Of course, that we're not talking about a lot of permissions here, because we also could implement something like an user can, for example, have 3 different permissions or 5, it doesn't matter. So right now we're going to work with only 1 permission, but if you need to change, it will be very easy to do that. Okay, so we're going to create our user entity, and our user entity, a lot of this code that we're going to create here, not a lot, but a part of them, we already saw how to create it in our last live stream, which we created this project here. So now we are basically going to create our entity. So let me check the chat. If you have any question, guys, you just let me know here in the live chat. I'll be answering every question that you have, okay? So let's create the user entity here. So let's click here in the entity. Just to make sure. Look, this is our product entity. So basically a lot of these annotations here we're going to use in our user and other entities that we are going to use, okay? So let's create here, right click in here, new Java class, let's call user. So basically this is an user entity, and usually I do not add the entity name in here because this is our base project. It's because that's the base of our project, and I don't use the entity here. But in the other packages here, like repository services, I always add services or repository after the class name to be more easy to find and to debug your code. Okay, so let's just use user here, and part of this is the same here, so we can just copy here. I'm going to explain these annotations here for now. So basically the first one that we have here, we have here the getter and setter. This is from Lombok, which means that the getter and setters, it will be inserted in our project when building, so you don't need to create manually all the getter and setters methods inside our class. And we also have this two that is it's from the Lombok, because it's the all constructor and no all args constructor and no args constructor. So which means that we don't need to create the constructors manually in our code. It will be generated automatically. And we have here the entity. This is the annotation that tells Spring Boot that Spring Boot, which means basically that actually is saying to JPA that this is going to be a table inside our database. The table annotation allows us to give a name for our table, because if you just use entity, this name, the name of the class, it will be exactly the name of the table in our database. So let's just change here to users. And another common practice here, best practice, is that every table in our database is created using plural. So our object, our entity is singular. For example, it represents only one user, but when it comes to the table it will be representing one or a lot of users, for example. So recommendations is that we use table names using plural, and our objects it's singular in the so basically when you're using here in a simple one, if we're going to retrieve a lot of data from user, we just create a list from java.util. Okay, so let's create our attributes here. Basically, we're going to use we're going to create the ID, we're going to create the email, we're going to create the name, and we're going to create the, of course, ID, name, email, and also we're going to create the password. It will be basically a default user entity. And another one that I would like to show you guys how to use is the active, because for example we're going to add here, for example, private, and we're going to use a boolean, so which means that it will be active or not. So I'm gonna use active. So it's basically when you're working with boolean, we are making a question, is active or is not. So it will be easier for us to detect if a user is active or not. So you'll be able to stop the login from these users. Okay, so if the user is not active, we're not going to allow them to log into our API REST, and we do that inside our custom user details, in which we can control the entire login process. Okay, so another one that we're going to add here is the role. If the user is, for example, if there is an admin or just you are a user role, something like that. To do that, we're going to create an enum. What is enum? Enum uses to represent information that it's a fixed information. For example, if you have 3 or 4 options that is fixed, and you need to make sure that in the database there's only 4 kind of information. For example, permissions or roles or everything you need. For example, status. For example, if you have an entity, for example, in product status, if I have the product or product categories or something like that I have only, I don't know, maybe 4 categories, we just create an enum and it will be easier to identify the specific information, and it will be consistent in your database. So we're going to create a new package here. And the idea here is to create a new package to create a row enum. So we need to be careful, because when you're working in Java, we need to be careful with the package names. For example, if I'm going to create here a package called enum, the enum, let me show you. Let's create a new package here. So if I try to add enum as a name of the package, the idea, it will say that it's a keyword, a Java keyword. So we cannot use keywords from the language to declare like packages or even classes names. So we are going to use in the plural here, so enums. Okay, so let's create this package, and this package we're going to create an enum called row enum. Let's go here and just new Java class. We're gonna use the name like row. Oops, yeah, row enum. Oops, I forgot to change in there, but we can just, it's not a class that we're going to create, it's an enum, and here we can create the enums that we want. For example, we can say something like row, and we're going to use, for example, the row user, it will be the one, and then we're going to create another one, it will be row admin. Okay, this is the, just a second, let me change. I used a shortcut here and change the format of my keyboard. Just a second, let me change back. All right, so my keyboard is back. So now, as you can see, we have a enum called row enum, and we have basically two options in here. Oh, I need to be careful because I use the dot here. Okay, that's because my keyboard was changed, so the character was in a different key here. Okay, so now we have a enum, and we have two options. Either he is has a row user or a row admin. So with that, we're going to I'm gonna show you how do you protect your customer, for example, your controller. For example, to save a product, the user must have admin row. If not, the user won't be able to access the information. So I'm going to show you how to activate this after we inserted the entire Spring Security configurations. Okay, so now we have here let me close here. So we create the enum, and now we can add another attribute here, which will be the private. It will be the row private. Let's add private. It will be row enum. We're going to call row, and we also going to say something like the type of this attribute is a enumerated. Enumerated, and the enum type it will be string, which means that when we use there is two type of enum types here that we can use in our enum, and we have to understand these two options in here, because when I use string, it means that this text in here, the exact text that I choose here, it will be inside our table in our database. So if I choose, for example, to use the type not string but the ordinal, it will just enum type dot. This is the order option here. It's called ordinal. So when I choose this option, it will save the number of the position here. For example, row user is the position 0, and the row admin, it will be saved only the number 1. So actually I need inside the database the actual name here. So to do that, I just change the enumerated here, the enum type to string. That's what I want here. Okay, so now we create the user here, and of course that we need to create the primary key. So let's just copy here because it's the same thing here. I already explained the last in our last live stream. I'm gonna paste here. So we're going to let the database to handle the IDs for this table. So automatically the database will increment the information here. Okay, so our user table is already it's ready. So now we're going to create our the new entities that we need here. So basically we need now the login history and then the refresh token. So login history, we are going to create basically the identification, like the user, the ID, the user ID, the access token that we gave the user in the moment of the login or something like that. So let's create here another class. Let's just go here into entity. Let's create a new one. Right click and then Java class. Let's call login history. Of course, that we're going to use the same annotations here. Let's add here login history. So we are going to change. Basically, we're going to change here to login history. And we're going to add a few attributes here. I'm gonna copy and paste these attributes because it's the what we need to get to the important stuff here that we need. Okay, so let me just copy here to be more fast, and then we go to the Spring Security implementation. So let's add here. That's the fields, that the attributes that we need here. Let's just add the entire imports here. We need to be careful to import from the Jakarta persistence, which when it comes to the annotations from to our entities. So let's change here. This one here, generated type. What else we need here? So let me remove here just to explain a little bit better. This is the same annotations that we added in the user. We added here the name of the table, and we have these attributes here. We have ID. We're going to store the user ID. So the user that logged in, we're going to get the user ID, and then we're gonna save into the login history. We're also going to get the email of the user that used to save it. And we're going to save the access token. This is very important because with this login, we can track the entire requests that the user, we can trace the steps that the user took inside our database, inside our API REST. So the other thing here is when it's the time that the user logged in. So we're going to use a local date time, which we will store the date and time of the login. So okay, now that's ready here. Our login history is ready. Let's go to the next one that I already talked about, which is the refresh token entity. The refresh token entity is another, it's a very important one also because we're going to store the refresh tokens that the users received at the moment of the login, and we're going to use them to generate another JWT token without the user logged in again. Okay, so new Java class. Let's create here the refresh token. So we are going, basically I'm going to copy here because it will be the same informations here. Let's paste in here, and we're going to change here to the refresh token table, which will be the table name. We're going to create the ID. It's the same, a few attributes that are basically the same. Let's just get here to be more faster. Let me add here. Okay, let's just okay, let's import the ID here, which is our primary key, the generation value, which will be how the database will handle our ID, and of course we need to import here the local date time, and we're done here. So this is a very important part of our project that needs a little bit of attention. Let me show you, let me explain a little bit better. So we're going to create a table called refresh token, and it will have a ID, which will be our primary key. Then we're going to create also save the user ID, so the user that logged in into our system, and then later on the user will use our refresh token, our token, to get a new JWT token to keep making requests in our API REST. So the important thing here is this attribute here called revoked, which is a boolean, because when we revoke a refresh token, it means that the next time that the user is going to try to refresh their token, which means that the JWT token expired, and now they are trying to get a new JWT token so they don't log in again. It won't be able to log in again because we revoked the access. So this is the idea of this revoked attribute here inside our refresh token. So this way, basically, we're going to do not allow the user to keep accessing that JWT token. Okay, so we finished the tables that we need to create. So basically, we need to create these attributes, these entities here, and now we need to create the repositories, which will be the JPA repository that allows us to interact with the database using JPA. And let's create here. Okay, let me close the product, then let's just close this one here. Let me close the enum here. Okay, so all right. So right now we need to create our repositories here. So let's, for example, let's start from the user. So let's create here user, and then in user here we're going to create the repository here. So right click, Java class, user repository. It needs to be an interface, and then we extend from JPA repository. So JPA repository need to say which entity it will be mapped from. So it will be the user from our entity. Be careful because we also have here the user object from a lot of new packages, and you can see that this is the package of my project, which is in right here. So that's we need to be careful with the import here. So okay, basically we need this one here, and let me just add here just a second. And we're basically when we are going to log in into our system, we need to implement here the find by email here, because we need to find the username if the username is already here in our database. Okay, so we need to add this find by email. And okay, now we are going to create our user service. Let me just add here. So we can add the entire structure from these entities here, and then we're going to directly to our Spring Security configurations, because we are building the base of our project, the base of Spring Security. You cannot create Spring Security without our user or login history or refresh token, because it's the main part, the main structure from the authorization and authentication of our Spring Security. Okay, so let's create a new Java class here, and we're going to create the user service. We need to annotate here with service. We need also to add the annotation required args constructor we don't need to create constructor manually here, and we're going to inject the private user repository inside here our project, and we're going to also use to final. It's already using. Okay, so and also in user here in user we need to create a few methods. I'm already going to create. So when we go to our Spring Security, the entire base is already completed. So in our user service here, we need to add a few methods because it will be used, like the implementation of the find by ID, user find by user find user by email, find by ID, and basically the save, because we're going to we need to register our user. So we need to create basically 3 methods here. So the first one, we're going to create a find by email here. So let's create a public, and it will be a user. I'm gonna try this save one here. I don't want to use, let me remove here. I don't want to use the entire suggestion for the IDE. Public user find by email. Okay, find by email. Let's just import the user here. Import from user, that is our entity here. We need to be careful with the import. So find by email, we receive a string email here, and we need to create our find by ID, and also of course that we need to save our user. And let me add here the find by ID. Find by ID. It didn't suggest, now that I want to. Public. Now we have find by ID, okay, and define by ID, but here I would like to return in an optional without the optional, directly the optional from user, and I don't need to remove the URLs here, just like this. Oops. Okay, so now we have the entire methods, all the methods that we need here when we need to log in, save user, and everything. Okay, so the user flow here is done. So now we are going to create from, let me close the user here. Let's just create, for example, the login history repository. So let's go to login repository, new Java class. It will be an interface, and login history in repository. We need also to extend from JPA repository. All right, and the JPA repository to be from login history. Just import in here, and now it's done. Basically here we don't need in the login history we don't need to implement any new methods, because we just basically need to save the user that just logged in. And now we need to create the login history service. Let's just add, oh, actually login history service, let me just login service history we won't be able to create for now. We are going to wait a little bit because we need to create another structure here. So, but before that, let's just create now the login history. Now we have the refresh token. Let's create the refresh token repository. So right click in repository, new Java class, and then we need to create the refresh token repository. It needs to be an interface. We need to extend from JPA repository, and we need to import in here. So now it's done. Here we need to implement another method, and it's already suggested here because we need to find by token what it means. Because when you're logged in our project, I mean, when you're trying to generate another JWT token from our refresh token, we need to find our refresh token if it exists. So we need here to create this find by token here. And now we can create our service. Let's create the refresh token service here. In a few minutes, I'm gonna show you why I didn't create the login history service yet. So let's create the refresh token service in here, and we need to annotate here with service. We also need to add the required args constructor for our attributes, our injection from our repository. Refresh to private final refresh token repository. And in our service, in our refresh token service, we need to add a few methods in here because it will be required for us to do that. Because we need to find by token, we need to save, we need to create a few new methods in here. So inside the refresh token here, we are going to create we are going to create a few informations here, because we need to generate a new refresh token, which is a UUID. UUID, it's very used in systems, in a lot of identifications, because UUID means universally unique identifier. So basically it has 32 character. It's a hexadecimal characters, so 32, which means that it's 128 bits, and it's very hard for someone to try to guess the numbers. So it's common use, for example, for your attribute, your class unique identification, because usually when you're using a web application like Angular or another framework like React.js or something like that, when you're trying to locate a specific information, for example, I need to I need to edit an user. So you, from a list, you click into a specific user and then redirect to another page. And it's common that inside the URL you have the ID, the user ID, to load that information in that page. So to avoid that, we change the long for UUID. So when you're in a editing page for the user, it's hard for someone to try to change the digit and locate a different user. Okay, so now let's get back here to our refresh token service here. And I'm also going to get a few informations here, because it will help us to understand a few things here. So the first thing we need to do here is understand that when we're creating a refresh token, we have here a variable called which is our expiration for our refresh token. So in here it's 120 minutes, and when creating the refresh token, we need to set the when this refresh token it will be expired. So to do that, we need, let me get the method here just to make a little bit more sense here what I'm trying to say. So in a refresh token, we're going to use basically this part of code here. So let me just import here everything. Oh, I did something here. Let me just remove here. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is import this value here. What is this value here? This value, we are saying that we are going to use this variable here. Oh, I need to be careful because it's imported from import from Lombok. It's not from Lombok. It's from Spring Framework. Let me change here. It's a value here. So what we are saying is that when I'm generating a refresh token, I'm going to check which value it is in our settings. So this is the way to locate this variable here. So I have this variable here which says when the refresh token will be expired, which means that it will be from the time that it's generated, it will be 120 minutes after the creation. So I'm importing this variable here because it's in our application properties. We're going to load inside our variable here called refresh expiration. So with the annotation value at value, we can load the variables from our application properties, and with that we will be able to get the values from the configuration, and we are storing inside this variable, which is a long. And now we are going to implement our save here. So what we are saying here, let me just expand here. What we are saying here, we're saying that when we log in, we are going to generate a refresh token, which basically will be here a refresh token. We receive the user ID, and with the user ID, we are going to create a new instance of refresh token. Then we are going to set the user ID. We are going to set the refresh token, which is coming from java.util, which is a way to generate a random UID, which is this one here, and we're going to convert to string. So we're going to store a string with 32 characters. It's hexadecimal characters, so it will be stored as our refresh token, and of course we're going to retrieve to our user. And we also saying that the expired date for our refresh token, it will be local date time dot now, which means the exact moment that it's been generated, or which means that it's basically at that login. And we are going to add plus minutes. We are going to add this amount of minutes. What is this variable? This variable here, it's the data that the amount of the total minutes that are stored here in our application properties. In this case, 120 minutes. It will be injected in here in this long variable here, and it will be added in here. So we are going to save, and we're going to persist inside our database. And the token set revoked, it will be started with false, because if somebody revoked this JWT token, then it will be it's going to be true, and the user we won't be able to use again to generate a new JWT tokens. Okay, so next step here. Okay, now we need, let me save here. Oh, another information that we need here is to validate our JWT token. What it means, validate our JWT token, because our refresh token, because when we try to generate another to log in, when we try to refresh a new token, we need to validate if this refresh token that we get from the user, it's a valid one. So how can I say that this is a valid one? I need to access here and find by token, and then in the find by token we need to I need to change this one here. I need to return here a optional. Let me add here the optional from Java util. Then let's change in here, and then add here, and let's finish the explanation here. So here in our service, we're gonna say something like, to validate our refresh token, we're going to receive the refresh token from our user, and we're going to validate. To validate, we're going to try to find inside our database. So after we find, if we didn't find, we're going to throw a runtime exception saying that the refresh token was not found. But if we find the refresh token, we found in the refresh token inside our database, we're going to check if it's revoked. If it is revoked, we need to say that this expiration token is already revoked, so the user cannot use to generate another JWT token. The other information here is to check if it's already expired, because if your JWT token, if your refresh token is going to expire in 120 minutes, that's the configuration here. So when you try to validate, I need to check if already passed this 120 minutes, or the minutes that you set up the minutes to expire your JWT token, and then we return the refresh token. Perfect. So now we have the entire refresh token ready. We also have the login history service ready, and we need now we are going to dive into our security. So let's get started here. So let me just close this one here. And let's just close the user, also close the user here. Okay, perfect. So the next step we need to create here, it's basically now it's the the implementation of Spring Security like in the core of Spring Security, because since we started here, basically we created the entire base of our infrastructure, our that we need. So now we're the architecture. So now we are going to create a few important informations here. So the first thing we need to create here is we're going to create a new package here, and we're going to call security. So in this security package here, we're going to add a custom user detail. What is that? Every time we authenticate in our system, the Spring Boot store the information of the user that has been authenticated inside the Spring Boot context. And in this context, we need to use user detail. The user detail is a way to in every request, we identify the user, or even if we are creating a specific functionality inside our project and we need to retrieve the user ID from the JWT token, so from the request, so I know who is sending me the request and I need to retrieve the ID, the user identification. So I need to use a user detail, and user detail is an interface, and we need to create a class that implements that interface, and that extends to that interface, and we're going to use this interface to retrieve the data from the user. So now we're going to create a new package here. Let's right click in here, new Java package, and we're going to call security. Okay, now we are going to create a class called custom user details. It's required for our context of the authentication. And right now we're going to create a new Java class here. Let's create a custom user details. And here we need to implement something here, because this is a class that needs to implement an interface called user details, which is part of the Spring Boot security. So let's implement here, implements user details. As you can see, user details from org Spring Framework Security Core. So let's implement here, and because we implemented here and it's an interface, automatically we'll be able to implement the method. So let's press Alt Enter, and there's this option here called implement methods. And here in these implement methods, basically we are going to add every single method here. Let's click here and add all the methods. This is a very important method here, because we will be able to implement important parts of our system, like this method. For example, here we can retrieve the roles of the user, we can add passwords, we can get of information here. And another very important one here is, for example, the enabled. Here we are going to say if our user is enabled or not. For example, if we deactivate our user account, automatically the user won't be able to log into our system. So automatically this class will be able to block the login from any user that is deactivated. Okay, so to do that, the first thing we need to do here is to create an instance of our user entity. So let's create private. Let's create a private final, and we're going to create a user, which will be our entity. Be careful with that, it's coming from our entity package. So user, that's what I want to here. And we're going to create a constructor. So basically it's just creating a constructor here to obtain. So when I call this custom user detail, I can just send the user here directly, and it will be able to check a few informations in here. So actually I'm going to add a few methods on my own here. So basically we're going to add here a get a few methods like get ID, get name, and something like that, because just check, let me check something here, just a second. Get, if there is any question here in the chat. If you have any question, just let me know here in the live chat, or if you're watching in the moment in the future, just let me know in the comments. All right, so next step here, let's create a few. I'm gonna paste the entire code here, that it will be more easy for us to understand here. Just let me get the entire methods in here, and we're going to explain. I'm going to explain everything. So we get we can be more faster here to finish here. The entire code will be available inside in our GitHub repository. Okay, so you can check all the entire code in there. Okay, let me introduce you a few things in here. Okay, first thing here we need to understand is that I have a attribute here which will be our user, and we are going to use a custom detail constructor. So now we're creating a few methods of our own custom user detail called get ID. So we are going to retrieve the user get ID, which means that it will be the instance of user, our entity here. So we retrieve get ID, we can get the name in the method called get name. We have a get password. We also have a get email here, and we also get a get row. So if this is a admin row admin or row user, we'll be able to retrieve directly from our custom user detail. And here we're going to retrieve the email, and now here we're going to retrieve a few information that is very important here. First we need to import these informations here. So let's just import here, which means that here we have a collection, and this collection we are saying that we're going to retrieve the authorities. What is these authorities used on? When you try to protect our controller, for example, we are going to protect our controller, for example, so that a user that doesn't have a row, a admin row, won't be able, for example, to save a product in our product controller. For example, I'm going to say something like, oh, here, this method, it will be allowed to be executed only for users that are admin. So to do that, we use the information that we're going to load inside our customer detail here. That's why we're going to retrieve the row of the user. So if you need to implement a lot of new roles inside our project, you just need to make sure that this list returns the list of permissions of this current user. So with that, your user can have a lot of new permissions or new roles. Okay, so just make sure that this list returns all of them, then you'll be good to go to protect our methods here using pre-authorize and check for multiple authorities. Okay, and the next one here we have here the get password. It's default for the interface. We have also the username. This is an important one because the username of our project, we're not implementing a username attribute. Basically, the username needs to be the same as the email. And we also have here a few methods that is very important here, because let me explain something here. We have all of these 4 methods here that if any one of these 4 methods return false, automatically the login won't be processed. It won't be. You won't proceed the login. For example, if look at the last one here. I implemented the last one. It's called is enabled, which means that if the user is enabled, then I'm gonna retrieve true, which means that I'm going to return here user.is activated. So what is this information means? Nah? Oh, let's just me check here because my monitor just rebooted. Just a second here. Give me a second, please. All right. So, okay. What is saying here, if I'm just trying to, for example, let me access here, is activated. Let's go to the user here. We created inside our user entity here, we created an active here. So what it means, this active? It means that if I deactivate, which means it to be false in here, it means that our account, the user account, is not activated anymore. So I'm returning is activated. See, if it is false, automatically the login will be not completed. Okay, so the same here is credentials expired, or even account non-locked. If any one of them return false, automatically the login it won't be completed. So that's the rule of these methods in here, because if you implement, for example, functionalities inside the user for every one of them, for example, the account is suspended, or the account is locked, or is expired, if anyone returns false, automatically you won't be able to log into the system. All right, so, okay, perfect. All right, so this is our custom user detail is already finished. And now we can create, let me remove this one, this import that is not being used here. With our custom user detail already created, we will be able to create our login history service, because in our login history service we use this. So because why we need, let's just create the login history service here. Let me just check here, just a second. Okay, login history service we need to create here. We needed to create the custom user detail first, because to save the login history, we do need the custom user detail, and I'm going to explain why. So let's create the login history service here. And of course that we need here to just add the annotation service in here. We need to add the required constructor here. Okay, and now we need to add our, let's just create the private final for the login history repository here. Okay, and now we are going to save our login history. So the login history, it's going to be used when the user logs into our system. So when we authenticate, the only information that we have here that is the user, basically it will be the custom user detail that we just created, because when we authenticate our user and we create, you will see inside our auth service that we're going to create to log in, to register and everything. So every time we log in, we'll be able to get the custom user detail that we just created. That's why the login history, it will be called when it's login, so we need the custom user detail. Okay, so the method for us to save the login history here, I'm just pasting here. We need here, let me just let's just import here. That's the login history, the custom user detail you just created here. So why we need it? Because inside the custom user detail, we have an instance of user, we have user email, we have all the information we need, and also we are going to get the JWT token that we're going to send back to the user. So let's just import our entity, and now we are going to save our login history, which means that when we are logging into our API REST, we already have a JWT token, because we're going to create next the JWT service. So you generate a JWT with claims and everything, and with that we'll be able to save our login history. So our login history is now completed. And the next steps here, we are going to create all the services that is required for us to create to finish our project, okay? So now we are going to create the JWT service. What is the JWT service? Here, that's where we are going to generate a JWT token. That's where we are going to extract the username, in our case it's the email, from the JWT token every time that our user send a request to our API REST. And basically, well, it's where we are going to sign our token with our password, our secret that is located in here in our application property. We are going to sign in using this secret key here, okay? All right, so let's go here into the service, and we're going to create a new service, and it will be called JWT service. All right, JWT service, of course, that it will be a JWT here. It will be a service. Let's add here service. All right, and we are also going to add here. Let me just get back here. And in our JWT service, we are going to add we are going to import a few informations here, and I'm also going to paste here, because it's a code that you'll be able to use in your enterprise projects. So let's just get a little bit of time, because it's already let me check, almost 2 hours of content right now. We are live for basically 1 hour and a half. So let's just get the entire information here, and let me explain everything in here. It will take a while to finish the entire content. So, but do not give up. That the project will be in a very you'll be able to implement this in your own projects. Let's just get a few imports here, because it will be more. Let's add in here. Okay. Let me explain everything in here, okay? So now we have a JWT service. We are going to get the secret. What is going on in here? Basically, we are getting the security JWT secret. We are going to use this secret. This secret, it's what I showed you. That's this secret here. Do not send this secret in your application properties for production, okay? Never send for production this information. You need to add, for example, as a operating system variable. And now we are getting the secret. We also getting the same information, which is the JWT expiration date, time in minutes, because it means that our JWT token, it be expired in every 10 minutes. So we need to add this information in here. So we are going to add inside this variable here. Okay, and to generate a new JWT token, we have this method generate token, and we also have here the custom user detail that we just created. Let's import it here. And here that's a very important part here, because inside a JWT token we add claims. What is claims? That's a few information that we can decode the JWT token, and you can retrieve, for example, the user ID, the name, the email, and for example the role of the user. So this is very important, for example, to extract this information directly from the You can extract directly from the JWT token in your front end application that are connected to our API REST. So it will be easier to access this information here. All right, so now we are creating the claims here, and we are adding inside a map, which is a hash map, a simple hash map. So you're basically used to create this kind of mapping in your projects, in your daily life, in your daily projects. Okay, so now next step here, we are going to we add all this information that comes from the user detail here, because inside here we also have these methods, as you can see. Let me click here. If I click with Control and click in here, we'll be able to check the methods in here. But my IDE is kind of, it did not recognize. Oh, now it's recognized here. So we have these methods here, and so that's why we can just get the information from the instance of user detail here. Okay, and right here we are going to build the JWT token. So how do we build the JWT token? We need to add the claims. What is the claims? It's the claims, the information from the user, like ID, name, email, and role. We add inside the claims. We also set here the subject. What is the subject? The subject is a common, for example, use for username. It's like the username of our user that is inside our token. It's called get username. I'm gonna show you when we finish here. We're going to retrieve a JWT token, and I'm gonna show you in a website that decodes the JWT token, and we're going to check all the informations in there. Okay, so then we need to say when it was issued. Okay, that's why it's a new date in here. We also set the expiration. This is very interesting because when you're setting the expiration, we use date from, and then we get the instant now, which means that it's basically a timestamp that it gets the long information of time, and then we get this information that is right now. Then we issue I'm issuing this JWT token plus, and we add the time, the minutes, that the how much time this JWT token will be valid. In this case, it's this variable here that is being loaded from our application properties, that in our case it will be expired in 10 minutes. So that's why we say something, we add here, and then we say that plus in specific time, and the cron unit we need to say that is in minute. If it was in hours, we change here, or if it's in milliseconds, or it doesn't matter. And then we need to sign in our JWT token. How do we sign in? We use this method that gets a key, and this key is based on our secret. What is our secret? It's the secret that we are loading from our application property, which is our secret for signing in a JWT token. That's perfect, right? So let me close this one here. Now we just generated a JWT token. So that's when we are going to log in. We are going to generate a new JWT token. That's how we generate it. And there is another method here that we're going to use, that because it's very important here when you're in a new request. We are going to create a filter, a JWT filter, to retrieve the JWT from the request every time that a new request comes to our API REST. And this is to extract username. In this case, we're going to receive the JWT token, which be basically the token that someone generated before here with this method. They are sending this JWT token as our header of our request, and we're going to retrieve, and then we're going to retrieve the username. To retrieve the username, we need a few information here, because we need that's something very about security. Okay, every time we generate a new JWT token, we need to sign our JWT token to make sure that it's our system that generated the JWT token. Because if somebody intercepts our JWT token, make changes, for example, add new permissions like rows or add new claims or something like that, and try to submit to us again, every time they try to do that, we are going to extract the username from here. And when we're trying to extract, we are going to use our key to retrieve the data. So if the information that we try to extract here and we use our key is not the same key we generated the token, then our system will automatically say that this JWT token is not valid anymore, or someone tried to hack our JWT. Okay, so this is very important in this case to make sure that this JWT token that we are generating is the same one that we're going to receive in a request. And okay, so JWT token is already completed. There is a few steps that we need to finish to complete our project, so we are basically very close now. And after we create the JWT service, we need to create a custom user details service. Be careful to not be confused with our custom user detail. Let me just click here. As you can see, inside our security package here, we have custom user detail. Now we are going to create a service that it will also use interfaces that Spring Boot allows us to use to make sure our authentication is completed. So we are going to create a new class here, a new service, Java class. We are going to call custom user detail service. So notice the difference, because here we have a custom user detail. Now we are going to create a custom user detail service. And you can ask me, what is the difference? The difference is because in our service, it's the service that will allow us to make sure that we are loading this user from our database. So when you're logging into when we are, for example, logging into our system, or even when we are validating a JWT token, we need to check if the user inside inside our JWT token, it's the user that are inside our database. So we need to create. So this is a service. So, but the important thing here, we need to implement the user detail service. So let's just another difference, so you don't get confused. Here in our custom user detail, we implement from user detail. Okay, so now we are going to implement. Let's implement from user details service. User detail service. And now we also need to implement methods, and it will be this method called load user by username. All right, so this method is required, and because this is a service, we also need to add the annotation service here, and we need also the required args constructor, because we're going to instance here our user service, because we're going to search for our user service. So let's add the private user service needs to be final, because we are using a constructor by Lombok here with this annotation here, and inside here we are going to just make a new implementation. So how can we implement here? So now we are going to, first we need to find a user by email inside our database. So let's create an user. Be careful, user must come from our entity. So user,
and it's already suggested from for us. So we also have here the email, so the username. In our case, username is the email because we did not create a new field, a new attribute called email. So we basically is find by email. So we can use the username here just to let the Spring Boot more, the flow of Spring Boot be more clear when you're, you know, maybe making some changes inside our project here. Okay, so now if we found the user, if the user is not is new, which means that we did not find the user inside our database, we are going to throw a runtime a username not found to our Spring Security. Okay, so let's add here if user like this. So if user is new, actually I'm gonna check out if it is new. If it is new, I'm going to throws, and I need to throws this. We need to be careful because it to be this username not found. The throws here must be username. Check it out. Username not found exception. So now we're saying that if our user if we did not find by email here, we're throwing an exception. But if everything is okay, if did not end here, because when I'm executing a method and I have a throws, if the throw is executed, the entire method ends. So if did not get inside our if, in our condition, we just return, if did not go through the if condition here, we just return our new. We're going to return new, and we need to return our custom user detail and user, because here's something very interesting, because you can see that my method says that it will return an user detail, but you can see that it's returning an instance of custom user detail. So why the idea here is not saying that something is wrong in here? It's not saying that something is wrong because my custom user detail implements user details, which is the exact type that they need to return. So when I implement an interface, for example, and I'm implementing an interface, it means that my custom user detail instance can be casted automatically to our custom user detail, because it's something like everything of the father of the class, it's also inside inside the hierarchy here. Okay, so that's why I can return a new custom user detail passing the user. So this way I can return in user detail, and it's based on our search inside our database, which we are trying to find by email. Okay, so customer user detail service now is completed. So we finished one more part of our Spring Security. We are almost there. Okay, guys, we almost there in our in our entire structure of our Spring Security. There's a few topics here we need to talk about, but we are getting close. Okay, so don't give up. And now we need to create a new class here, because it's the part that every time somebody sends us a request and there is a JWT token inside the header of the request, we are going to get this JWT token and validate if it is a valid one. So we are going to implement a JWT authentication filter that it will be responsible for all these. It will be something like our entry point of our security. So every time somebody sends us a request, we are going to validate that JWT token. Okay, so let's create this class here, and we're going to create inside our security package here. So the entire structure we created here, it's it's basically entities that we're going to handle, and now we are basically entering into the core of the Spring Security. So here inside this security package here, new Java class, and we are going to create JWT Authentication filter. When we are saying something like filter, it means that every time that something happens, it will every request it will pass through this class, because it will be a filter. So now we need to say that this class is a component. Let's annotate here with component. We also need to say that it's a request arg required args constructed here. And we need to inject here a few instances that we need here to work with our filter. And let's first we need to understand something here. This is a filter, so we need to extend from a filter. Let me add here. So we are going to extend from the filter called once per request filter, which means that every request it will pass through this one once per request. So every request that our API REST gets, it will be intercepted by this filter here, which is called once per request filter. Of course, that we are implementing something. Usually we have to implement the methods here. So basically there is one method here, which is the do filter chain. Do filter basically now, because every time we create a filter, we need to do something, and if after everything is done, we are going to make sure that the request goes through our API REST. So here it's our JWT. I'm going to just let me just click enter here to organize a little bit more our entire one here. And we have here let's just click another enter here. Let me undo here just a second, please. It will be more organized if I break down in here, then here, yeah, right here. Okay, so okay, all right. So we need to throws here because it can get a few exceptions in here. All right, so what should we do here? These methods, it's a way for us to intercept all the requests here and check if everything here it's ready to go. Oh, and first we need to inject a few options here, because we need basically our JWT service here, and we also need our custom user detail service here. Okay, so let's add here private final JWT service private our custom user details service, and I'm going to get the entire code here and explain, because it will be more effective for us to understand for every step of the way here. Just give me a second. Filter chain. All right, I have a void here. Okay, let's just get here. It will be more effective for me to explain everything in here. Okay, so let me paste in here, and let me explain everything here. So first we have something that this method is it will be executed every single request, and here the first thing we need to do is we need to get the headers, the auth headers here, which means that every time we send a request to our API REST, we need to send in our header an authorization. What is the authorization? It's a header that's saying that we are embedding inside the request the barrier token, the JWT token for our authentication. And for that, we are trying to get the authentication header. So this is how we get an header. And this header, it contains a little bit of informations here, because it contains this is the key, and then we need to retrieve the value, because headers is key and value. The key is the name of the header, which in this case is authorization, and the value we will receive in our authentication, because it's default for all authentications. We have the barrier token. So now we get the header here. We check if it is null, or if it is not, if it's null, or if it does not contain the barrier token here, because every single one we have to check if the barrier it means that we are sending a barrier and then our JWT token. That's why basically it has 7-8 characters. We have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 with the empty space. Okay, so there is 7 characters here, which is the barrier token. And if it is null or does not contain barrier token, I need to let the do filter chain, which means that it will pass through it will continue the requests, and the Spring Boot security will handle if there is no request and all the endpoints in our project is protected. Automatically Spring Boot will handle these messages to our project. And after that, if does not return here and end right here, which means that our token, it is from this 7 part, which means that, because when you're sending a JWT token, you are using this word barrier and then space and then the entire JWT token. So if does not go through our condition here, which means that our token, it will start from the position 7, and we're going to add here into the token. This variable token will store the entire JWT token, and then we get into the try here. So let me import this user detail here. Just a second, user detail here. We are going to import we are going to use the custom user detail service key. Custom user detail service, beleza. All right, that's okay. So now we're going to check. Let's get back in here, and we need to import this one here, and we are just finished the entire processing that we need. Just a second here, and we need to import this one here, and that's done. So let's understand what is going on actually exactly inside our filter. So we retrieved the token here, so we got the token, the JWT token, and then the JWT token, we need to retrieve our username. In our case, it's username, it's email. So now we use the JWT service, and we have that method that I told you about, which is the extract username. So the extract username receive a JWT token, then it goes through a builder here to check, to sign in, use our key to check if it's a valid, which means that if it was generated by us, by our system, and then in the end we return the email here as a string. And then we have here the email. With the email in hand, we can access our load by username, which was our custom user detail service that we receive our email username. We go through our database and check if it is not null, which means that it is inside our database, that username. We're going to return a custom user detail. That's why I'm using here a custom user detail, a user detail. And now we are going and add this username, user and password authentication token, which is needed to pass to our authentication process inside our Spring Boot, and it will send the user detail that we found inside our database. Then we pass the another extra credentials here, and then we pass user detail point get authorities. What is the authorities? Because I told you guys a little bit earlier that when I try, let me try to do something here. For example, like if I try, for example, there is, if I'm going to say something like only user that has admin role will be able to save a new product, create a new product. So I have this annotation called pre-authorize, and then inside this pre-authorize I can say something like this. So when I'm saying something like this, it means that I'm saying that the only user that will be allowed to save a new product here, it will be the users that has the role admin. So in here, what I'm saying is that I'm going to pass the username here. I'm sending to the Spring Boot context. That's what's going on in here. Spring Boot security context. I'm creating a authentication. This authentication, it will be set to the Spring Boot Spring Security context in here, and inside the Spring Boot Security context it will be exactly this information here, which will be the user detail information, which is the user detail contains the user ID, the email, the username, the roles and everything. And I'm saying that the authorities of this user is this one here. So these authorities is it's exactly these authorities that I passed in our custom user detail here. Let me open here. These authorities here get authorities that I pass the username role. So the roles of the user, it will be at the security context holder, which means that every time I try, for example, to insert a new product in our controller, and I say something like pre-authorize has role admin, which means that only admin roles, which means users that has this role, it will be able to save a new user here. So as you can see, we have a little bit difference in here, because in our user entity, in our user user enum here, row enum, we have the word row user and row admin. If I'm saying here that it's just admin, it's because when I use this option here, which has role, it means that we don't need to specify the word role. It will be implicit here. So now, but if I have role is that does not have the name role, I can use the has authority. I'm showing you guys later. Okay, so now I add this information inside our security context holder, get context, set authentication. So now I'm adding the information here, and then this is the information here when I'm getting a error. For example, if my JWT is expired or another error occurs here, I'm just clean the context, so the Spring Boot will clean the entire context holder, which means that I won't be able to continue my request. Okay. So I'm gonna explain a little bit more further about the get authorities here in a few minutes. Okay, so I finished my JWT authorization authentication filter, which is once per request, and then just to finish here, in the end, I just say something like filter chain do filter request and response, which means that I'm going to set the request through my entire application here. So I need I need to excuse for a minute, because it's been a while, like 2 hours, and I need to take a break. It will be very fast. Then just a second, please, guys. All right, everyone, I'm back. I'm sorry for for the delay. I had to take a break because it was like 2 hours and I need to went to the bathroom. Okay, so let's get started. Let's continue here. And now we now have the entire structure with our JWT filter here. And now we are going to create the next step to finish our entire project here. Okay, so let me just change here my screen just a second, and let me add this another screen here. Okay, now our filter is completed, which means that every time that someone send us a request, we are going to retrieve the JWT token. We are going to check if it is not if the authentication header is on our request. Then we are going to extract here the email. By extracting here the email, we are going to verify if this JWT token was generated by us. If not, we are going to throw an exception, because in this method here in our JWT service, we set our key, which means that we are going to verify if it was generated by our key. If not, we are sent a information that this is not a valid JWT token. After that, we check in the database for the user. Then we create an authentication to make sure that our security context holder contains all data from the user, which includes our user detail. We also add the authorities that we're going to use later inside our controllers to block to restrict access to user that doesn't have the right role or the right permission. Okay, and then they said here, if anything goes wrong, it will be we are going to clean the context. When we clean the context here, this means that I can just remove this one here because it's including another language. I'm sorry. And if something goes wrong, we are going to clean the security context holder here. And by cleaning up, and then we're going to find filter here. It will send the request through our Spring Boot security, and if there is anything wrong, the entire Spring security will be able to validate everything automatically. Okay, so the JWT authentication is ready, and now we are going to create a few configurations that is very important for us here. Okay. Now let me just close every single tabs here. Oops, let me close all tabs. Why didn't close? I can close manually, it doesn't matter. All right, so let's continue here. Okay, next step we're going to do here. Why did not close? Something is wrong in here. It's not on pin tab. Okay, now it's closed. Okay, so we need to create a few configuration files here, because our user has a password. So the password needs to be encrypted, and these encryptions comes from the password encoder config. We need to create a configuration that allows us to create a bin so we can encode the password of the user. And let's create here a new class here inside our actually we're going to create a new package here when we called config, and I'm going to explain everything here. So inside our config here, we need to add a class. We want to create a class that it will be a configuration class, and this configuration class, it will be called password encoder config. Let me create this class in here. right click inside in the package here, new Java class, password encoder. So this class needs to be a configuration. So let's add the configuration, add configuration, which means that will be handled by the Spring Boot when we activate, when we run the project. And we're going to create a new bean. A bean, it's basically a class or method that we create that will be managed by the Spring Boot, which means that we create an instance and let it available inside our context, and we can use in other classes in our project. So now we're going to create a public, it needs to be public, and it's going to be a password encoder, As you can see, it comes from Spring Security Core, okay? Spring password encoder. Let me just, it's exactly this one that I want to create. So what is this? I'm creating a bean here, and it's called password encoder, and I'm going to create a new instance, return a new instance of bcrypt password encoder. So this will allows us to encode a password. So every time we try to log in, we are going to send, when you're going to save a new user, we are going to encode the password before saving inside our database. And every time that we need to check if, for example, manually, if we need to check if a username, if the username and password is correct, we encode the password that someone is trying to log in, and then we compare the encrypted password with the encrypted password that we received with the encoded password inside the database. If is a match, then it means that it's the same username and password. If it means that the password is correct. All right, so let's just create another configuration that we need here, and this configuration is called authentication config. This authentication config will allows us to use a authentication manager. This authentication manager will be used when we are trying to log in into our API REST, and it will allow us to log in and get the entire structure of the Spring Security to make sure that our login user, our refresh token, our JWT token, everything is valid and you can use inside our application. Okay, so now we are going to create this authentication. Let's create a new class in here, new Java class, and let's call authentication config. This one, it needs to be a configuration as well, configuration, and we also create a bean. So let's create it at bean, and here we are going to create public, and then public we create authentication manager, authentication what's wrong? Let's just a second here. Authentication manager, that's this one here, authentication manager, and here we are going to create an authentication configuration. Just a second. Authentication configuration, it's this one here, authentication configuration, and then we just create called config, for example. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. Just a second. I need to remove this one here because I'm creating a bin here. I need to add inside the parentheses, I need to add the configuration here, and then the configuration, let's just call config for now. Let's just call config, for example, because we need a parameter of a authentication configuration, and this authentication configuration, we are going to return the authentication manager that we need. So right now, okay, so config, let's remove this space in here, and let's just then enter here, and then we're going to return the config.authentication. Let's just see what's wrong in here. Oh, okay, I need the exception here. Yeah, that's it, that's right. Okay, so now we have the authentication config here. The idea is to make it a configuration. Sorry, the idea is to let available an authentication manager inside our Spring Boot context, and then we are going to use when we are logged into our auth service. We are going to log in. We need to create a instance of this authentication manager, and the idea here is just to make it available inside the Spring Boot context. All right, so this class is already done here. It's now here, and to make it basically to finish our configurations before we enter into our controller and our service for authentication, our DTOs that we need to receive all the information we need. Basically, we need to create another configuration, which is the security config. What is the security config? Let's just create here inside the config package here, new Java class security config, and then in our security config we need to add a few information that is very important here for us. The first thing we need to create, we are going to inject a few things here. So we are going to add the annotation from Lombok, the required arguments constructed here. We also say that this is a configuration class. This is a configuration class. We need to enable web security, because if we do not enable web security, we won't be able to use the pre-authorize inside our REST controllers to block, for example, restrict access for user that does not have any specific kind of role or permission. Okay, so we need to enable web security here. So let's add enable web security, enable web security. So enable web security. What's wrong in here? Enable web security. That's right, enable web security. And we also need to enable method security, which allows us to add the method, the pre-authorized inside our method. So we can block with this one. Let me add now here. It's called the enable method security. So which means that it allows us to add pre-authorized not just inside our class here, but in a lot above methods as well. Okay, so now we need a few configurations to consider here. The first thing, we are going to add our JWT authentication filter, because I'm gonna show you where it will be used, because this web configuration, we need to say something like, where is the entry point of our security config? So we need to add here private final JWT. It's this class in here, JWT authentication. Let's copy here the name of the class. It's this one here. So we are going to this one, and we are going to call JWT filter. Let's import in here. Let's call JWT just JWT filter. Let's import the class in here. It comes from our package security. All right, so we created this variable here. All right, so now we need to create also a very important thing here, because we need to create a bean that we are going to use like a security filter chain. So let's create here a new method in here. We are going to create a bean, and we create a method called public, and it needs to be a security filter chain. Security filter chain is this one, and we can call like filter chain as well. Filter chain we can add here, and then we're going to create like here. So now we are going to call this HTTP. Instead of chain, we're going to call HTTP. It will call HTTP, and we need to return HTTP build in the end here. We need to return, and HTTP it's the variable name dot build. And we need to change here to HTTP. It's not a security. HTTP. Okay. All right. So, let me just remove here. Let me check what is going on in here. Actually, let me paste the entire code here, because it's very simple one, and I am going to explain everything. It will be easier to do that. Let me just copy here. This is the entire bean here. Let me just close here. All right, so let's understand everything in here. Okay, so let's import the security, this HTTP security here. All right, so we are going to do a very important configuration here. So first, our security config, we are saying that it is a configuration. We are enabling it's security enabled, also method secure enabled. Okay, and now we are going to create a method that we need to configure to set up a few important things. For example, we are going to disable this CSRF. This is basically used when we are, it's a CSRF. It's used when we submit forms. So basically when you're creating HTML forms in here, because Spring Framework, Spring Boot is part of the ecosystem of Spring Framework, and Spring Framework is used not just for API REST. You can return HTMLs, you can create using theme leaf, we can create entire pages here, HTML, dynamic templates and everything here. So we need to disable here because we are using an API. We also saying that session manager here, let me just report here. We are saying that we are creating a stateless session, which means that we are not going to store states inside there is no session inside our API REST. This allows us, and this saying that it's stateless. Every API REST must be stateless, which means that does not store the state. It's something like stateful and stateless. For example, in SSR application, which is server-side rendering, it's a stateful. For example, it's save the states. We have sessions. We have session that you identify users, and we identify sessions with a lot of information. But in API REST, it does not must not have state, so it should be stateless. And we also saying that exception handling we are going to return, and this code here, which will be this SC unauthorized. Let me click here. This means that we are going to return a 401, which means it's an unauthorized HTTP code. So every time that something went wrong in here, we are going to return a unauthorized. Okay. So now we need to add a few informations here, because we are using Swagger as our application, and we are going to create we are going to allow our documentation, our API documentation, to be available even with security. So we are going to exclude our Swagger pages from the security. Okay, so how you do that? We just add here the authorize authorized HTTP requests here. We are saying that these request matches, which means that every one of these one that contains that is these URLs here, these endpoints here, it's going to be permit all, and all the other one we are going to authenticate. So any request we are going to authenticate, so it needs authorization to be accessed. So every other, unless the only endpoints it will be available without authentication, it will be these methods here. All of this one, it's basically is from Swagger, except the home here, but we're going to talk about this later. And we are going to allow the URL under the auth this path auth, because we are going to create our auth controller here, and we are going to use something like auth login and refresh token register that does not have that we do not activate security from these endpoints, because we are trying to create a new user. You don't block this with security. Okay, so and then we need to be clear about our add filter before. So here we need to add a filter. So but basically we need to add our JWT filter here, and who is this JWT filter? Is our JWT authentication filter, which is our filter that is activated once per request, and we do all the authentication, all the verifications here for every request that we got into our API REST. Okay, so and then we also have here saying that if we got any error, we are going to activate this kind of class here for handling the exceptions. That is handling the filter, the user password authentication filter. All right, so let me just check what else we need here. Let's just check here. Just a second. Stateless. All right, let me close in here. Let me close every tab in here. Let's just check what's wrong in here. In our config, there is something still missing in here. Let me check. I'm gonna try to run, because it will already give me where is the error. Oh, okay, that's the import from bin here. Okay, now our security config is done, and we finished our this one here. Okay, now we have a few configurations. Actually, the entire configuration now is done. The only thing we're going to add about configuration is about our documentation when it comes to security that we're going to set up in a few minutes. Okay, so basically our Spring Security flow is already done. And now we need to create our structure for login and register and generate the refresh token. That's the next step we're going to need. So let me try to run this project right now and see how is it, if it is everything okay right now, if it's not getting an error for a bean or something like that. All right, everything is fine. As you can see, we already created the login history table. It was created the refresh token table, user table, and so every table that we need, it's already created. So if we open our database, probably we already see the entire all the tables in our database. Let me open here. Let's just check things out here. Here's our database. Let me open in here. Let's expand in here. It's loading. We have here databases. Let's click in schema, public, and tables. As you can see, we have all the tables in here. We have the user table, we have the refresh token table, and then we have the login history page. So we just run the project and it created all the tables that we mapped in our entities here. Now we need to create the structure that allows us to create a new user and then to log in and then to refresh token. Okay, so now we are going to create a class called Auth Service. But first, let's create the DTOs that we need. What is the DTOs? DTO stands for Data Transfer Object, which means that every class that we need to work, for response data, request data, we create inside a package called DTO. So let's create here a new package here. Let's call it Java class DT. I create a package actually. Let's create a new package here. And we're going to call DTO, so DTO, and right here we're going to create a few DTOs here. Then the first thing we need to do is to separate what is request and what is response. What is a request? Request, that's the data that we send to our API, and the response is the data that we return for someone that tried to access our API. So we're going to create two new packages inside here. So let's create two packages here. The first package here, it's called response. And then we are going to create a new package, new Java class. New package, and it will be called request. As you can see, I deleted because it will be also inside the DTO. Okay, I have two packages created here. So now we are going to create our DTO that we need. First, we need the DTO response. The response, it will be when we logged in, we are going to send a JWT token, a access token, and a refresh token. So let's create in here, and let's call JWT response. So inside the response here, new Java class, we are going to create a record. It's as you can see, it's a record, not a class. And I'm going to copy here because it's a simple one, just so we finish faster here. Let's just add here, and we are going to create. We are calling. Okay, so we are creating a JWT response inside the DTO response package, and we will have two attributes. We are going to have access token and a refresh token. That's the response once when we log in into our application. And inside our request package, we are going to create three DTOs here. Which three DTOs will be? It will be the request, the register request. What is the register request? It's the data that we're going to send to our API to create a new user. So we're going to create a new user, and we're going to call register request. And in the register request, it's also a record, and I'm going to paste here just to add here. In this record, we are going to have, when saving a new user, we are going to send a name of the user. Oops, it's wrong, something here, name. We are going to send the email. We are going to send the email, name, email, and then we're going to send the password, and we need to send here the row, which is the row enum. Okay, this is the information that we need when we are saving a new user. All right, so the other one is when we are logging into our API, and we are going to call the login request. So let's create a new Java class. In this case, it will be also a record, and we're going to call login request. So to log in into our system, basically we need to send the email and the password. So let's remove here. So we have basically two fields, two attributes, email and password. And to finish, we need the refresh token request. What is that? It's when our user logged in, it will receive an access token and a refresh token. The access token will be expired in 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes, the user can send us a new request with a refresh token, and then we return for them a new access token valid for more 10 minutes. So this is a strategy called refresh token. So we are going to create the refresh token. Let's create this new request here, request, and then click Java class. It will be a request, it will be a record, and that's the record. And for our refresh token request, we are going to use only one attribute, which is the refresh token. Okay, now we created all the DTOs that we need. We have the requests, and then we have the responses, and now we are going to create our auth service. What is the auth service? Is our service that it will handle log in, register, and also refresh to retrieve a new token. All right, so now we are going here in our service package here, and then we are going to create and right click, okay, new Java class. We are going to call auth service. This is going to be a service, so we need to annotate here with add service. We also need to annotate with required args constructor from Lombok, and here we are going to inject a few services in here. Okay, if you have any question, please let me know in the live chat, or if you have any question and it's in the future, you know, it's not in the live right now, live stream, so you can just let the comment in the comments below that I will answer everyone. Okay, so in our auth service here, we need to inject a few information here. Okay, so what do we need here? Let me check the chat here, just a second. Okay, all right. Okay, so the first thing we need here is to create a method called login. And in this login, we will receive a login request. Let me close this one here, and we're going to create step by step of our login here. Okay, so this is my auth service, and we are going to create a method called public. It will be For login, we return a JWT response, which is our record. We're going to return JWT response, and we are going to call it login. This login, we are going to receive our login request, exactly this one here, login request. Let's just import our record here from our package, our DTO here, login request, and now we are going to create our entire structure of the how can we log in into our system. Okay, so let me just add a return here, because the return, let the return null just to remove the error. Okay, all right, so I mentioned a little before about our config here that we created a, let me get back here, we created this authentication configuration here, that we created a authentication manager. So we need an authentication manager, because the authentication manager is to be used for us when we are logged in into our service. Okay, so let's inject all the services that we will need here for login. Okay, so let's inject here, let's add here private final authentication manager. Let's call the authentication manager also let's call authentication manager. Okay, the other one we need to add here is the JWT service, because we need to generate a new JWT. So JWT service, it's already suggested for me. We also need what else we need? We need the refresh token service. We need the private final. Let's just copy here for the next one. We need a JWT, sorry, we need a refresh token service, final, what happened here? Final refresh token service. We need a refresh token service. We also need our login history service. We need our login history service here, because we need to save we need to save who is logged in at the moment. And we also need a user service, of course. We need a user service. All right, a user service. And the last one, we need the password encoder. The password encoder is the same one we created in our configuration here. This little guy here, we need to add in here. So we are going to add private final, okay, I don't need this one here. Actually, we need the password encoder, okay? So, all right. Let me remove this zoom out a little bit here. So we need all of this one here, because we're going to implement login, register, and also we are going to implement the refresh token. So for login, we need to create an authentication object, and this authentication object will be able to locate using username password token. Let me copy here everything so we will be able to explain faster. Let me add the entire logged in here. It will be faster for us to understand. Just a second in here. All right. The first thing we need is an authentication. Let me import the authentication here. The authentication must be from security core. We need to be careful with that. Spring security core. So Spring security core. Because the authentication is similar to the one that we need in the authentication manager. All right, so now we can use this user password. Let me remove here. Let's just add the other. Let me just import here, and I explain everything at once. Okay, refresh token in here. Login repository safe. Okay. let me explain here. Okay, let me explain everything here in the login method. All right, so when you log in, someone is going to send a login request. What is inside our login request? Our login request, it's composed by username, by email and password, which is our login configurations that is inside our entity user. And we receive the request. We need to create an authentication, and the authentication is going to authentication manager dot authenticate, which is the authentication manager that we created a bin inside our config package. And in the authentication, we need to use a new username, new password and username authentication. And in there, we are going to use the request that we receive from the user, passing user email, and then passing the password. After that, we create a custom user detail, which is our class that we created. That is a class inside our package security. Here we create this one that we can receive an user in our constructor, and we can return all this information, including the authorities, including if it is activated or not, is enabled, and everything here. So the customer user detail use authentication.get principle. In this way, we can, after this one here, it will be able to access the entire operation of login and password with username and password inside our database, using our entire structure, Spring Boot structure that we created. And get the principal, it's from authentication that returns a user detail. And then we need to create an access token. Okay, we need to create an access token. This access token is generated in our JWT service that we created, generating a JWT token, in which we also add the entire claims, including ID, name, email, row, and of course we sign our JWT token with our key here, which we are, and we also add saying that our JWT token will expire using this configuration in minutes. And we get this access token that we generated there, and then we are going to generate a new refresh token, because we need to return to our user a refresh token. So when our access token expire, they can generate another run using the refresh token. Then we save here. We just save the login history, passing a user, which is our user detail. And we also use your access token. After that, we just return to our user the JWT response with the access token and with the refresh token. This way, we log into our API REST. Okay, so I have here the name usage. I don't have anyone here. Okay, so now another method that we need to create inside our auth service here is the register method. What is the register? The register is the method that we're going to create for creating a new user, which it will be able to register a new user. So let me copy here, because it will be more faster, so we can, the entire code will be available for you guys, and then you can debug, you can do anything you want. So the next method here is the register. What is the register method does? Okay, so let me import our request, register request. Our register request, it's a DTO here in our request here. Register request that we are going to receive from our user. We're going to receive a name, we are going to receive an email, we are going to receive a password, and the row if it has a row user or row admin. So now, to register a new user, we need to check, for example, in user service here. What happened here? User service. dot find by email to check if the email already exists. We need to make sure that only one user, we need to make sure that the email is unique. We cannot have more than one user with the same email. So for that, we're gonna check here if it is not, if it's different of null, which means that there is a record inside our database that already have this email. If already have this email, we throw an exception saying that email already exists. Let me change here because I reuse this in my other tutorial. So email already exists in here. All right, so now let me import here my user here. Let's import the user. Let me check if I import the user from the correct one. Yes, it's from our package. So I just create a new instance of user. I get the name here, and I'm populating a user instance from our register request with the name, with the email, the password. This is important one. The password, as you can see, I am using the password encoder, which is our password encoder, and the password encoder dot encode, and then I'm passing the password that I received from the request, which means that if I send, for example, a password like 123, it will encode into a bcrypt format, and then I set the row that I received, and I also say something like, oh, my user for default when I'm creating a user is already active, so that's why I'm setting boolean.true, sorry, and then I'm gonna say something like user service dot save, and I'm gonna save the user. This way I'm saving a new user. I'm using a void method, which means that I'm not returning anything. So basically I'm save the data and I'm not not returning the user saved. It's a good practice because it's not a very we cannot return a saved user because of the password. So that's why I'm using a void method. All right, so next step here, let's create the refresh token part. So the refresh token, let me create already here. So we are going to create our repository, our controller, and after our controller, our entire application, our entire Spring Security is done. It's a little bit complex. That's why I'm trying to break it down in parts that it make easier for you to understand. Okay, so when you're trying to refresh a new, getting a new JWT token using a refresh token, we are going to create a JWT token. Let me just change here, user not found. Let me change here to user not found. That's because I also have a Portuguese channel, and I showed how to create the part of this implementation there. That's why some messages is in another language. All right. So when I'm trying to refresh to get a new JWT token, which means that I'm going to use a refresh token to get a new JWT token, which it will be expiring the next 10 minutes again. I send a refresh token. I need to try to find the refresh token inside the database. So after that, I need to check user service. Then user service, I need to try to find the refresh token. Okay, I find the refresh token, then I'm going to try to locate my user inside my database. If the user ID does not exist, I just throw in runtime exception also. Then I create here a custom user detail using the user that I retrieve from the database, and then I can just generate a new access token using the generated token that we use the same method in JWT service that we use for login. And then I just return a new JWT response with a new access token and the refresh token that the user already have. Okay, so this way we finished our auth service in here. The next step is to create now our auth controller. So let me close here. The auth controller is the most simple one because we already have a controller, so we will be able to create faster, and then we're going to see the entire result. So here in control, inside the controller, we are going to create a auth controller. Let me create here. Let's just try to add here controller, new Java class, auth controller. Here in auth controller, we are going to add a few annotations that are default for all APIs that we need. For example, let's just click here in our controller. Let's get everything in here. Let's paste in here, and we need here it to be auth. Oops, sorry, it's wrong in here. I typed the wrong auth. Here it to be also auth because the endpoint here must be auth because we already allowed in our security config. Auth required. This is a REST controller. We are added the request mapping, the required constructor, and then tags from our documentation. Okay, all right. So now we are going to just add here a private. It can be private. It doesn't need to be public because it be just here. We're going to add an auth service here, and let me just copy the entire code here to be easier for us to finish here, because our controller is it's a simple one that we already know what's going on in here. Let me just maximize here. All right. So to log in, we use a post mapping, which means that we are going to send something in our request. In this case, we are going to return a JWT response because it's the same one our service you return. And here we need to add the request body. This is an important point to be careful. As you can see, request body, there is two annotation that I can use. Add request body. I have one from IO Swagger, and we have org.spring framework. We need to select the Spring framework. If you select wrong, this one, the code will still compile everything, but our object will never be populated. Okay, so let's add here, and we are going to receive a login response. And then we just access the login response over there. The login method inside our auth service. Oops, let me see here what happened. Ouch, clicked something wrong here. Okay, that's okay. All right. So, and now for the register, we are just returning a normal response entity in here. We're also going to, we have a body which will be the register request, because it will be sent to us a name, a email, and then a password, and then the role. All right. So just need to import the HTTP status here because we're going to use a created, which is a 201. All right, and the last one it will be the refresh token here. Okay, so in our auth controller, it's the base path of our auth controller is auth here. Then we have login, which we return a JWT response. I also can return a response entity here. It's okay, but the reason I'm not using response entity here because I just returned the entire the login directly. So now let's see the register. I receive a register request, and then I return. It's a void one, so I don't return anything, because if I try when I create, I don't return the object because the user, it contains a password, so I do not return passwords from our response. And then I have the refresh that receive a refresh token request, and then I return a JWT response also. Okay, so now I can run a project. Let's run the project and see what's going on. When we run the project, the first behavior that we're going to check here is because our Swagger, it will be a little bit different. Let me update here. Let's just open the index.html again. Let's just log in, index.html. Look, we have here our project, okay? We already have our open API here, our documentation, but as you can see, there is no button that I can authenticate. So I even can, for example, I can also register. Let's register a user here. Let's click and try it out. All right. Let me give a zoom in here. Let's add a user here. Let's call Arley Braz. The email. Let's call the email. Let's add an email here. Let me get an email, valid email here, a valid one, just for test. So let's create a email here called arley@gmail.com. A password. We are going to send a password called 123. So you will see that the password, it will be encrypted, and the row. Let's just send the row user. Okay, let's send the request and see what happens. As you can see, we got 201, which means that our user was created. So let's try to log in into our system right now. Okay, so now we can remember our auth controller. There is no authentication blocking our. It's not blocking our auth controller. So let's try to log in. Let's try it out. I'm gonna paste here the email that I added. It's my email, arley@gmail.com. And then I'm going to use the password 123. Let's see what happened here. Let's click in execute. And as you can see, we return 200, which means that it was a success. Hey, that was a success. And as you can see, we have the access token here, and we have a refresh token here. The refresh token is a UUID, universally unique identifier that I talked about, and we implemented on the login. So here is my JWT token. So let's get this JWT token and let's try to see what is inside our JWT token. So let's access JSON web token, JSON web token. I think that's this is the website. It's not this website that I want. Let me check here. Just a second, guys. JSON web token. I think that's this one here. There is this website called JSON Web, which is the JSON Web Token. Let me paste the code that I am here, and you can see a few information. This is the algorithm that we signed in. The algorithm that we used is declared in here. Let me show you guys. The algorithm is here in the get key in our JWT service here. Just minimize here. Let's open here. Let's in service we have here the JWT token, and here in the right here we have the key that we are using, and then in the key we can see that we are using the key. It's part of the algorithm that we are using to generate our key. Okay, so what is inside our JWT token? Okay, so here you can see that we have, for example, we have the row that we added. Here is the claims. We added row, we added name, we added the ID. In my case, it's the user ID. User ID is 1 because it's the first one that we created. Then we have the email, we have the sub, and we have the data about the expiration, which is which is the information that it says that when it will be expired. All right. So here we have the entire information of our JWT token. So let's go to the database and let's click here in the user database. Let's refresh. And as you can see here, our username, ID1, my email, I have my name that I added here, and look at that. That's the password. And the password, it is encrypted. So if I increase here, you see that my password, it is encrypted. And so the password, and here's the row that I have. I have a row user. So the password is saved encrypted. Okay? All right. So this password is encrypted. So it means that it's secure. All right. And let's check the other tables here. Login history. Login history. Let's update here because it's already open. As you can see, that's the login history. We have the token, the access token that we generated. We also saved in the login history. I saved the email, the login at, and then the user ID. So all the information is here at the login history, which means that if I need to track somebody, to track if somebody logged in, when logged in, the JWT token used, and everything, I can check this table then, and I have the history of the user login. I also have here the table called refresh token, which is the refresh token that we created also. So here we have the when it was created, we have if it is revoked or not, and we have here the token, which is an UUID. As you can see here, it's a 32 character of a hexadecimal character, and also it's 128 bits. And we also have the user ID. So our entire flow is basically done, but we also have a small problem in here that we need to check. Let's copy here, and you will see that if I try to execute any method like this one, for example, products, let's try to retrieve all products. Try it out, and as you can see, we got 401. Which means that we are not authorized, which means, so when I try to send a request, I did not add the authorization header. So we need to configure, to set up our API documentation to allows us to log in, to get the access token, and then authenticate inside our documentation. So how can we do that? So let's get back here to the code, and then we are going to create a new class, to be more specific, a new configuration class. And this configuration class, of course, it will be inside our config. We are going to call OpenAPI-config, and this OpenAPI-config will be able to add a few extra configuration to allows us to authenticate inside the Swagger, and we'll be able to test our entire application even when using the authentication. So new Java class, let's call OpenAPI config, and then I'm going to copy everything in here so I can explain for you guys what is going on in here. Let me just copy here so we can go on and finish our entire content here. So I just created this class. Let me show you here. So what is going on here? It's a configuration called OpenAPI config. I created here a security scheme name. Why I created that? Because our application, our security config is based on barrier token, which is our token that we are generating. So we have a barrier auth. That's the type of authentication that we are using. So basically, I'm creating a bean, returning an open API. So it will be basically available inside the entire context. So when I just open my I run my application, and then I open here this entire context of my Swagger here. It will be entirely configured based on our bean that we're configuring here. So first we can return a new OpenAPI. We can add an info. In this info, we can say, we can add a title, in this case, Spring Boot Security JWT, you know, and then the channel, the YouTube channel name. And we add here, I add the version, then we add something like add security item, and we need to add the theme saying that we are working with better auth. Basically, all the information that it was this one. We have this the barrier format. It's a JWT. We are using barrier automatically, and then the type, which is HTTP for request HTTP, and the scheme. Basically, that's it. The entire code will be available, and after we finish here, I'm gonna pull all the I'm gonna pull all the information, and then you can, I'm going to push all the information, and then you can just check inside our GitHub repository. Okay, so now let's run the project again. Let's rerun the project. Okay, the project has been started, and let's update our page here. And now we have, it's all customized here, Spring Boot Security, the channel name, the version is right here, and now you have a button here called Authorize. So how can we use that? First thing we're gonna do is let's log in again. Let's log in into our project again. So let's click here in log in. Then let me paste here the user and password. Let me paste here the user that I created. Let's execute, and now we have a new access token here. Let me copy the access token here. All right, copy. It's copied. Now we just need to authorize here. So let's go here and just click here in authorize. Let's paste in here and let's authorize and close. Now if I click here in try it out, let's see what's going on, what will happen. And now, as you can see, the entire project is available. The products, it's now available for this user because I am authenticated. And as you can see, now I have here the entire request, which means that it adding a header called authorization, added better, and then space, and then our entire JWT token that I authenticate inside our Spring Doc API. Spring Doc documentation. Okay, so now the products are being listed here, and let's make a few changes in here. As you can see, my user has row user. Okay, has row user. Let's try to block. So I'm listening. I can see the entire products. We have basically 2 products inside our database. So how can I protect this controller, this method inside our controller, to say something? Oh, look, I just wanna only people with admin row can access this endpoint. So how can we do that? Just let me close everything in here. Close all tabs. Let's go to our product controller. In our product controller, I'm going to say something, this one here. I'm remove this one here, for example, and in the get mappings, which means that inside the method that lists all data, I'm only letting people, users that is admin, to access this endpoint. So what will happen when I run again the project? So let me run the project again. Okay, let's go to the Swagger. Let's try to access, and now I got a 401, which is it's not EU access. So if I go there again, let me just go there again, and let's change to user, which is the row that I have. Let's change to user. Let's update the project again. Remember, you're using the same JWT token because it's available for 10 minutes. And let's click here in execute again. And I can access again because this method is protected only for is available only for people that has the authorization, the role called user. All right, guys. So right now we finished the entire content of Spring Security, and this structure of authentication, authorization that you're using here. So let me just remember you guys, because I said something when we started this live stream here. The authentication, it's saying who you are. For example, it's login, when I logged in, and the authorization, it's what can I do inside the API REST. So we implemented the authentication when we are logging into our application, and when I'm protecting this controller, for example, and saying that it will be available only for people that has a role user. That means that this part is the authorization, which means that it's what you can do inside our API REST. All right. So with that, we basically finished our entire project. So we have products here. We have products. And we also have our entire auth structure here that allows us to log in, to register, which means create a new user, and also refresh token. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you very much for all the attention. If you have any question, please let me know in the comments below. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification sign, so you'll be able to receive all the notifications when I post a new video. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much, and see you next live stream, or in the next video, of course.